Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Annika's Friday webinar. Unfortunately, Anne's not here today, so you have me helping Emil with his presentation. So today we're going to be talking about meta ad evaluation and optimization, which is a really interesting topic because I feel like a lot of people know how to set up ads and then they don't quite understand where they need to go from there. So thank you for doing this today, Emil. I'm just going to take you on to the next slide to introduce. There's one.
I thought you were asking me to do it. But yeah, I'll probably just introduce myself first and then we can do the natural flow so we don't go skipping back and forth. So yeah, I'm Emil. I'm a social media strategist here at Annika. Same job title as Rachel. Joined Annika about 4 years ago. Worked at an agency in Nottingham doing social media there as well. I work with clients all the way from the pitch stage to day-to-day management, which is essentially what this presentation is about. It's about a lot of the stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis, where it's the little things, the little tweaks and the little optimizations, how we constantly look at the data and evaluate it. Things that people might not know that we do. And it's some of the most important stuff if you want consistent performance. In terms of the clients that I do look after and have looked after, they've ranged all the way from startups, so one-man bands, to multinationals, some of the biggest companies in the world. So a lot of variation there. And yeah, obviously, there's no formula that fits all. So it's nice to come up with different solutions for different clients and markets. Got a track record of achieving results, especially in the e-commerce world, including a number of awards in a couple of years ago. So we always brag that we're the only agency that got so many awards that we could make a dinosaur out of the awards by putting them on my colleague's back.
That's great. Thanks, Emil. So if this is your first Annika webinar, I'm sure a lot of people have watched our webinars in the past. But if you're new to Annika, we are a digital agency. We're based in Leicester, but we all work remotely and we work with clients from around the UK. So we have lots of different arms to our business. So we offer strategy for digital marketing consultancy. We also offer strategy for AI now as well. Anne and Darren are very heavily into the AI world. We offer paid social. So me and Emil are social strategists at Annika. We offer paid search, so PPC, Bing, Microsoft ads, all that sort of thing. We are skilled in shopping. So we have a lot of e-commerce brands. And we have a training arm to our business as well. So we do the Digital Skills Bootcamp, which I'm sure some people in the webinar today will be part of. So that's a government-funded scheme where people can come and do, I think it's a 16-week course with us and learn everything about digital marketing. So if you are interested in any of these services, please do get in touch and we can come back to you with that. But right now, we're going to go into a poll before we get into the presentation. So hopefully this comes up on your screen, okay? If it isn't coming up on your screen, do let me know. Can everybody see that okay? Because I can't see that in the presenter view.
It's not coming up on mine, but I can't remember if it's supposed to.
Okay. Oh, yeah, people are filling it out. That's good. So the poll question is, how many metrics do you look at / believe that you should look at when analysing performance?
Yeah, I think that's the second poll. It's better to do the first. The first one.
Sorry, that was at the top. Let's go with this one first because I don't know. I don't think
if it's already there, they might as well. But yeah.
Okay, so currently, majority of people are saying 2 to 3. So we have 10%. We have 37%, which is 10 people saying 2 to 3. Then we have 41% of people saying 4 to 5. 19% of people, which is 5 people, 5 to 10. and then 4%, which is one person saying 10 plus. So majority of people are in the 2 to 3, 4 to 5 sort of bracket.
And then none with 1.
None for 1.
That's relieving. Yeah, if you just run the other one as well, then I can just get a grasp of people's experience, so I know how much to elaborate on.
So we've had 32 responses. We've got 51 people in the room, so I'll just wait a few minutes for some more people to respond there.
And then obviously throughout, if you do have questions or if there's something that you don't understand, like a term, just write it in the chat and then we'll answer it either live or after presentation's done.
Okay, so I think we've probably hit the limit of the amount of people responding now. So I'm going to conclude that with 38% of people think 2 to 3 and 40% of people think 4 to 5. That's where majority is sitting. Okay, let me close that one and we will do the next one. So this question is how much experience you have running ads on Meta. So the options are I've never run Meta ads. I've tried it once or twice. I run a few campaigns. I run ads regularly and it is my full-time job. Okay, so majority so far are sitting in C. I've run a few campaigns. And then following that, we have the same amount. So 24%. Oh, no, it's changed now. 25% have never run Meta ads and 23% have run ads regularly. There's 2 people in the room, 5% who it's their full-time job. Oh, this one's got a lot more responses than the last.
Yeah, it's because the people that have never run it, they couldn't answer the one before because they. But yeah, so apologies to the people that do it full time because there's quite a lot of people that don't have a lot of experience. It means I'll have to explain some of the terms that are probably common knowledge within our bubble, but not to people outside it. But there should be some useful stuff for everyone anyway. So yeah, let me get cracking. So on the agenda, I'm going to talk about analyzing ad performance, combining the different metrics to come up with a better idea of how the ads are performing, when you might want to make changes and take actions, the different types of changes to make, and then just conclude it all in the end. So first of all, the importance of optimizing. So what do we mean by optimizing? Essentially, we just refer to changes that are intended to improve the results, whether they're not performing, whether you have ads or campaigns that are not performing at all, or if you have campaigns that are performing, but you want to get even more out of them, you make little tweaks here and there that we refer to as optimizations. So that's essentially that. Day-to-day optimizations, they include, but they're not limited to budget changes, changes to creative, text changes, different types of delivery. By delivery, that could mean things like different placements, landing pages. So what pages you're sending people to through the ads, that can make a big difference. Ad optimization target, so what you're optimizing the ads for, aligning that with your goal. Say, for example, you're trying to achieve sales. If your ads are optimized to clicks, then you might not see the sales that you want because you've told the platform to look for clicks instead of sales. and running different tests as well, just to see what changes can do. What can trigger the need for optimizations? That could be seasonality. For example, you might have spike campaigns, or you might be selling or running a business where the demand is very up and down depending on the season. So, for example, we have a client that sells kids' books. That's quite seasonal because there are school holidays. So, optimizing the ads, especially the budget, depending on how that demand looks throughout the year, that requires quite a lot of optimizations. Fatigue, by that we mean if you run an ad for a certain amount of time, eventually people start to become a bit immune to them. We call that fatigue. And essentially, it just triggers a need to optimize and refresh. Poor performance. If you're seeing your ads perform poorly, then optimizations are usually needed. It's not necessarily the fact that they won't work. It could just be that tweaks are needed for them to work. Could be changes to available budget. Again, you start to optimize your ads. Say, for example, a client came to you and you have £1,000 per month to use to start off with, but then they've seen a positive outcome, so they say, okay, we want to spend 2,000. Then you have to make those optimizations and changes to your campaigns to adapt to the new budgets. So evaluating the campaigns. A mistake that many digital marketers make is to rely on one metric. So a good example is just to look at ROAS without looking in depth. That one key performance indicator, it could give you a good indication of what's performing well, but you do run the risk of being blindsided, because while that top line stat might actually give a good reflection, in many cases it doesn't. So, for example, if you do look at ROAS and it looks really good, have you looked at other attribution windows? So attribution windows is essentially when a platform takes credit for something. You can set that window. So on Meta, it's the default attribution window is if someone has clicked the ads within the last 7 days or viewed it on the 1 day. But have you looked at the other windows? Have you looked at the cost per click, the cost per purchase, and just trends over time? By looking at beyond the first line, you get a better idea of what campaigns are performing. You might also see what's triggering the algorithm to spend more, because especially if you run ads regularly, there might be cases where you look at the spend that the platform is allocating budgets to, and you think, why is it spending so much on that ad? Because I'm not getting the sales from this ad, but Meta seems to be favoring it big time. If you look beyond, then you might see what's triggering it. So, for example, maybe the cost per click is really low, and Meta is pushing the budget because the cost per click is really low for that ad as opposed to the others. But then the others might, on the surface level, be producing more sales. So I'll give an example of attribution window. So this is from a report that we have, and this is to demonstrate how much of a difference those attribution windows can make. So on the top, we've got the largest attribution window, the default one, which is 7-day click, 1-day view. If we look over the last 7 days here, it's 5.9. Now, you might have a client who has a certain target when it comes to the return on ad spend. That's 5.9 there. But if we remove the view attribution, which in many cases people will do, because if someone makes a purchase through viewing an ad but not clicking it, they've never even clicked the ads. So there's always a sort of argument, how much credit can you take for a sale when someone didn't even click the ads? if you remove that 1 day view attribution window, it drops down to 4.5. If you drop it even further to just 1 day click, then we're looking at 3.2. So you can see there's quite a lot of difference there. And essentially what we recommend is analyzing all 3 of them, looking at all 3 of them. You don't necessarily have to report on all 3 of them to your managers or your clients. But for example, the 1 day click attribution window on social media is a little bit too harsh because it is a platform where people are exploring as well. So if you're only looking at people that clicked and purchased on the same day, you're probably not going to get a good reflection of the real impact. So this was from a report that we've created in Looker Studio, but not everyone has access to that, or I mean, it's a paid platform as well. But you can look at these windows within Ads Manager in Meta. So you can compare the attribution settings within the Ads Manager, and essentially you can just tick the window that you want to look at. So by default, it will show whatever you've set the ads up to be optimized for. So if you haven't specifically made a change, then it's going to be 7 day click, 1 day view. So if you want to compare that to the other windows, then you can click these. And there's also a new one now called incremental attribution, which Meta essentially has come up with a new window where they're saying these are the actions that were taken that wouldn't have taken place without your ads. Obviously, you always take it with a pinch of salt, but they're trying to give you an even more accurate idea of what sales or conversions have come through your ads that wouldn't have come through without the ads. So you can find, in some cases, you find that you're getting a lot of sales or conversions on the top level, the default level. So that's set as 7 day click, 1 day view, 1 day engaged view. If you're really struggling to get the click sales, then you might want to go in and change it. An optimization could be to change it to 7 day click only. So if you look at the top one here, that's the default window. If you look at the one on the bottom, I've put none on both the other attribution windows. By actively optimizing the campaigns to look for click only sales, you might help the platform understand that you're really prioritizing the click sales. And in many cases, what you see is a change in performance there. You can lower the cost per click and also improve the results based on clicks only. If you want to do this, you have to do it on the ad set level, and you cannot change that once an ad set is live, you can't change it. So you'll have to recreate. Essentially, what you do is just duplicate the ad set and then change the optimization in there. I'm going to give an example as well of how deceiving the top line stats can be, and how much more of the story you'll get to know once you start digging beyond the top line. So I'm taking a real life example here where we've got 4 ad sets. They're all spending £20 per day. And you can see 2 of them have got 2 website purchases. So on the top line, you think, okay, they've got 2 purchases, great, they're performing well. The top 2 ones are not performing well. And that might trigger you to make changes. So you might say, okay, well, maybe I'll reduce the 2 top ones because they're not really performing. But I'll probably increase both of the bottom ones because they're both performing equally. But then if you look beyond that, you start to open up different metrics. You look at the ROAS. For one of them, the ROAS is 25, and the other one, the ROAS is barely even 1. So that already shows a massive difference in the performance between these 2, because one is generating big sales and the other one is generating tiny sales. So it's actually operating at a loss. but on the first screen, they looked like they were performing at a similar level. As you can see here, the total value was 52 for one and nearly 2,000 for the other. And then you can start to dig even further. Now I've ticked some of those boxes that I showed you where you can compare the attribution window. So I've ticked 7-day click and I've clicked incremental. If we look at those, then we can see that half of the sales are coming from click, half are coming from that view window. On the other one, none of them are coming from clicks. If we look at the incremental and the click only ROAS, is now dropped from 25 down to 3 for 7-day click, 5.5 for the incremental. So that's already giving quite a lot of difference when it comes to that story. If we look even further here, you can just have a look at how the purchase value, for example, here is dropping from 2,000 down to 240. And then the incremental, they haven't really given much information about how they calculate it, but essentially you can see how, in this case, the incremental is higher than the 7-day click. In some cases, it's lower than the 7-day click. That will vary. They'll have some justification in terms of how they calculate that. But yeah, that's why you don't rely on one. You don't just look at the whole picture before making those decisions. And then beyond that, we look at the secondary stats, because you can see the top two ones are still at 0 when it comes to the sales here. But then we look at the secondary stats, and all of a sudden the top one, the cost per outbound click, is actually the lowest out of all of them, which then makes you think there might be something there. You can also see that the ads to cart is quite high. You can see the CPM, so cost per 1,000 impressions, is pretty low. And you can see the reactions. So reactions means likes and that sort of stuff, is as high as the top performer. So already it's giving some indication that the top ad set isn't actually performing at the lowest level. So then what we can do is expand the time frame. So in the first case, we had it on 4 days. So judging by those 4 days, there's one that's performing and the 3 others are pretty poor. But then we expand it to 14 days, and all of a sudden the one that hasn't achieved a sale in the last 4 days turns out to be the top performer, because you can look at, if you look at the ROAS based on all 3 windows, it's the highest. So 7-day click is the highest, incremental is the highest, and the standard window is the highest there. So again, you've looked at the top stats, you've looked beyond those, you look at the secondary stats. Now you've expanded the time frame as well, because if you make decisions based on a window that's too small, then you might make the wrong decisions. So looking at the first few slides, you might have paused the first 2 ads because they looked like they were poor performing. But now we've expanded it, and all of a sudden it turns out that the top performer is one that you might have paused based on a shorter window. So common optimizations that you might want to make, if I'll probably go back to that example a few times when we're looking at this. So like budgets is probably the most regular optimization that I make in my day-to-day. Little tweaks here and there, taking into consideration all that I just showed there, in not looking at 1 day. If you have 1 day of poor sales, making a decision based on that doesn't make sense, because it happens. There's never a consistent line. No client has ever just had a consistent line of always having the same amount of sales. It's always up and down. Judging by 1 day doesn't make sense at all. Looking at bigger windows is going to give you a much better indication of where the trend is going. Budget adjustments, they are essential. You need to, say, for example, you look at the trend over sort of like 14 days usually, and if you don't make those optimizations at the right time, then what is likely to happen is that your end result is going to plummet. If you just keep the budget the same and pray that things will recover. You're better off adjusting it, and then once things recover again, you up the budget. You can automate some of those, but in the majority of cases, I do it manually just because I want to look at everything. But say, for example, you have limited time. You can create rules. So say, for example, you can create a rule that if the ROAS is lower than X, then decrease budget. If it's higher than X, increase budget. When it comes to increasing the budgets, we recommend being quite cautious just to minimize the risk. If you see a good reaction and results and you just throw money at it straight away, often what happens is that, say if we refer to ROAS as the key indicator, the ROAS might die because you've scaled up too fast. So we recommend increasing bit by bit and then seeing what the reaction is. So say, for example, if you're spending 30, instead of going, and the result is, say you've got a ROAS of 4, that's a target. At the moment, it's hitting 5. You're spending £30 per day. If you then increase it to 100, that ROAS might go down to a 1 because the increase in spend is far too high. Instead, we recommend doing something like increasing it to 50, having a look over the next few days what the reaction is on the ROAS side. If it's positive and it's remaining at 5, then you might go up to 70, and then you might go up to 100. But yeah, what you want to do is minimize the risk of that ROAS dying because the performance was good to start off with. So it's a shame if you increase by too much and then all of a sudden kill your performance. Fatigue. Over time, ads might start to experience fatigue. Your target audience, they sort of become immune to your ads if they've seen them too many times, especially the same ads. If you're on social media, you all experience it. It's kind of like while you might get some awareness, over time you become immune. So even if you click the ad to start off with, you stop clicking the same ad because you've seen it, you know what it is. That over time starts to create a downward slope, and it just calls for refreshment. If you're running catalog ads, fatigue is less common because they are dynamic. The changes are constant when it comes to the different products. But there are different things you can do to combat fatigue. You can introduce new audiences. For example, if you've got a 1% lookalike audience, you might want to expand that to, you might want to try a 1 to 4% lookalike, seeing if that brings in a fresh audience that haven't seen the ads and then gives you a little boost in performance. Replacing or adding new creative to the mix, always a good thing, but if you're running creative ads, if you've been running them for too long, refreshing the creative regularly is something that we recommend. If you have a creative that's been running for a while and it's performing, don't pause it, because if it's performing, it's performing. But what you might want to do is add in another alternative so that the platform can start to rotate a little bit, and the ones that aren't reacting to the original one anymore, they get a new alternative that they might react to. And then you've got different things. You can add different elements. So you can add enhancements. So by that, I mean sort of like the Advantage Plus enhancements. For catalogs, you can add in frames, and we use external software as well, just to add something different to the catalogs, just to refresh things and limit the fatigue. So here's an example of this is when we use the software. So we were running the original type of catalog ad for a long time. So it's just plain white backgrounds, products, fairly plain, non-branded. What we did was that we introduced a software called Confect, where we can design templates. and then we introduce different variations. So you can see the two on the right, they're different variations, and it just refreshes people's feeds. Because we were running the plain ones for years, it was probably needed. And once we started to introduce this type of ad where there are a few more elements, it's a little bit more colorful, it's got the branding, what we saw was an immediate boost, and it's really helped performance in the long term by introducing these ads. Details on the optimization side, they do make a difference. So if you make a minor change, it might be a marginal improvement there and then, but over time, that's going to make a difference. So even though it's fairly noticeable just to start off with, or if you look on in a short time frame, so say for example you make a tiny change that increases sales by 2%. If you look at 2% in like a 7-day window, that's not a big difference. But if you look over a greater period of time, that 2% can make a big difference. If you keep on making those minor changes, and those percentages are going to grow and they're going to stack up. So all of a sudden, if you made 5 optimizations, that's marginally increased it by a few percent. All of a sudden, that adds up. And if you got a 10% difference over a year, that can make a huge difference. These marginal changes, they can be something tiny like the call to action, changing that, say by default sometimes the ads have learn more, changing that to shop now if you've got a shopping ad, that can make quite a bit of difference. Another tiny difference could be, say for example, you're promoting, you're putting a label on the catalog ads, experimenting and seeing whether a strike through price or a percentage off works better. That again can make a tiny difference. But then if that works for one of your ad sets or one of your ads, the thing that you always need to think about is that if it works for one, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for all the others. So if you've tested it for one market, you still need to test it for the others. Because I often see that one minor change can make a big difference for one market, and I assume it's going to work well for the same client for the other markets, and it's the other way around. So it might be that percentage off works a lot better for your remarketing audience, whereas strike through price works a lot better for your prospecting audiences. But these are different tests that you need to run in order to find those answers. When it comes to the enhancements that I said earlier on, it could be little things like turning on or off any of the enhancements that come through the Advantage Plus on Meta. So I'm very selective when it comes to these. I think most people that run Meta ads full-time are selective, but they're usually all turned on by default. So if you have them all on to start off with, performance isn't at the level that you want it to be. Going in and making different tweaks here. So for example, you got they add colored backgrounds to the ads. In some cases, it looks terrible. By turning off things like that, that can make a big difference. Music, we've had cases where it's added music that isn't appropriate at all. Turning that off, again, it can make a tiny little difference. But then by making those changes, combining them together, all of a sudden, you're making a relevant difference. It's another thing that's part of the day-to-day optimizations, try new things in order to improve the performance. Ongoing testing is essentially the mode that I have with most of my clients. We're always in testing mode because we're always trying new things and we're always trying to improve. The new things, that could be something like a platform introduction. So Advantage Plus, all those introductions that I showed here, these are fairly new. When they were first introduced, that goes straight into testing mode. Let's test what works, what doesn't work, if it makes a difference. Or it could be things that you just haven't tried before. So you might have, it could be something like trying a new color in your creative, trying a different type of messaging. Is the messaging action focused enough? let's try a softer type of messaging. Let's try a more aggressive type of messaging. When it comes to running these tests, always give them enough time and pay attention to the budget before making a decision whether it was a success or not. In many cases, if you introduce something on Meta, something new, it doesn't necessarily allocate a lot of budget if you've already got ads that are performing there. So paying attention to the fact that the spend might be low and making sure that you give them enough time to spend before making a decision, that's quite important. And then when you're testing, you're in constant testing mode. You can start to roll them out. Say you're doing ad optimizations. You've tested a few new things. If they're successful, roll them out, but then pay attention to the other markets as well, because just because it worked for one doesn't mean it's going to work for the rest. Sometimes testing is triggered by the need of something new. So that refers mainly to poor performance. You need to try something new in order to improve the results, or else you might stop running ads on Meta because they're not working. In other cases, it's the desire to improve the results that are already there. So if you're an ambitious social media manager, you're getting the results already, you're still always going to be hungry for more. So you've overachieved and your ads have made more than what your client wanted. If you're ambitious and you want more, you want to beat the previous records and the previous results. So introducing new audiences is a good way of doing that. We have clients that have fluid ad budgets. So by that, I mean that if the results are there, then there's no limit to how much they will spend. As long as you achieve the targets, you can go as far as you want. But if the targets, say for example, the target is 5 ROAS, we want that ROAS to be 5. We don't want it to be 10. So if you're hitting 7, increase the budgets. And likewise on the other side of the scale, if it's a 2 ROAS, you need to decrease the budgets. The audience testing is a good way if you want to expand and grow. I mentioned the lookalikes as an example. So say you've got good success with a 1% lookalike, introducing larger percentages, testing and seeing if you get the same reaction from them, that can bring in a whole new revenue stream. And yeah, it's something that we do quite a lot if we're trying to expand. Both me and Rachel, we've had it with clients where we've been told to increase the budget, or sometimes TikTok, they run incentives, so you need to spend X amount. Now, obviously, we don't want to just spend X amount to get whatever incentive that they have. We want to do it at a profitable level. But in some cases, we can't increase the spend on a certain ad set because the frequency is so high already. We're already exhausting the audience. So we need to come up with new ways of introducing other audiences and different pools of targets. So yeah, it's audiences is a good way of testing and trying to expand on that front. I think that's about it. I can't even remember if I wrote the conclusions now, but I'll update it if I haven't. Oh no, I did do it, because essentially I stepped in last minute to do this. But yeah, essentially conclusions: evaluate your campaign performance thoroughly. It's probably the most important part of this whole thing and the thing that you should take away from it is to look deeper. I've not even covered looking in other platforms, such as GA4, and combining all of the stats and the metrics beyond the internal platforms to make informed decisions. Using multiple metrics and windows to get a better impression of the performance, monitoring the stats constantly, deciding what changes are possible, making gradual changes to minimize the risk, and making tweaks to test the impact. But yeah, that's it from me. I don't know if there are any questions I need answering.
Thanks, Emil. There was a few questions which I answered in the chat. Susanna has asked, when looking and analysing a campaign, would you look at meta ad analytics first, and then would you link GA4 data? And I've gone back to Susanna and said I would look at both. I'd make optimization decisions based on the platform data, but it's good to see how Meta is comparing with other channels through Google Analytics. I don't know if you want to add anything to that part.
Yeah, analytics is sort of, especially in the last couple of years, has become more difficult to get as much useful information from GA when it comes to the social media stats. That's why we're looking at, instead of relying on GA4, which sometimes gives it a completely wrong impression of the impact, looking at the harsher windows instead. So looking at the 1 day. If someone has clicked the ad on the same day as purchasing, you've got quite a lot of ammunition there to fight the case that it was a major part of the purchasing journey. But yeah, looking at the stats, it's always good to have a look in analytics as well. And yeah, you just got to combine it all into one to make a rounded decision.
Cool, thank you. There was another question from Hannah, which says, is there a best practice duration for ads? Do you go for shorter periods and see what works, or longer periods with tweaks throughout? I've gone back to her and I said, it's a hard one to explain over messaging. It's recommended to keep ads running constantly, but when you see poor performance indicators such as low click-through rate or low ROAS, this is where you try some of the optimizations that Emil's recommending. If you have a campaign-based ads, sorry, that didn't make sense, such as a sale with an end date, then obviously that would be a shorter time when you'd run ads only for a short period of time. So I don't know if you want to add any more on that bit. I said I'd ask you to expand.
Yeah, essentially, if you keep on creating new campaigns, you run the risk of restarting the learning every time. So what we often have is that we have campaigns that are constantly on, and then we have ad sets within them that are constantly on. And then we have ads within that we do rotate. And that's where we introduce new things. Like Rachel said, if you have a campaign base, so say, for example, you have a Black Friday sale, that's the period that you have. You just have to, by introducing that, if you introduce a Black Friday sale ad into an already existing ad set, you have a greater chance of it bringing in the previous learnings from that ad set and applying it so that you can get a more immediate impact.
Cool, thank you. That kind of links on to Rachel's question, which is, would you recommend adding in new creative to the same ad set or a new one?
Yeah, into the same ad set, unless you're struggling to spend. Because I mentioned sometimes the algorithm, say you're running a test, you add it to the ad set, you've got no control of spend within the ads itself. So you can't say, I want to spend minimum £10 a day on this ad. You can do that on the ad set level. So say you've introduced a new creative and it's simply not spending on it. It's spending pennies compared to the older ones. Then you might be forced to create a new ad set where you can put that cap on it. So you can put the minimum just to ensure that you spend enough. But say you're introducing a new creative into an ad set and it's going to be the only one live, then there's no point in creating a new ad set.
Cool, thank you. Matt Cocking, aka Ro, has asked, what was the software called that you used? And I've gone back and said Confect.io. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about like the actual impact that that's had on like the clients we use it for.
Yeah, essentially, it's a paid-for software. You do pay per month for it, depending on how many products you have in your feed and how many markets, so essentially international markets. Like I mentioned, it's had a really positive impact because it's just refreshed everything. It gives you more control to push your brand. You can add in logos in a more creative way. You bring more color in. There are a lot of catalog ads on social media platforms. By using something like Confect, you bring in a creative element that makes it stand out a little bit more, while still retaining that dynamic element that produces sales. Because anyone in e-commerce that runs ads on Meta, they'll know that the catalog ads, that's where the sales mainly come from. The creative ads, they bring more branding, but they don't necessarily, it's rare that they bring in more sales than the catalog ads. But in this case, if you have something like Confect, where you can have a nice creative template, you can bring in more brand colors than a simple frame that you stick on top. You kind of get the best of both worlds.
Great. Okay, we've got no more questions there. I did put the handout. I did attach the handout whilst Emil was talking. So if anybody does want a copy of this presentation, please do go in there and grab it. But I think that's it, really. We don't have a webinar next week. Next week is actually Friday the 13th. And that's not the reason why we don't have a webinar. The reason is because we have an event on next week. So a lot of the team will be very busy. The next webinar is on the 20th of June, so the week after. And that is going to be hosted by Anne and Darren. And I believe it's on AI.
Yes, it is.
It is. Okay.
Of course it is.
Yeah. It's a favorite topic.
It's always AI.
Okay, that's great. Thanks everybody for coming this week.
Do we want to, because there might be some people that might be interested in the event next week. If you just want to explain a bit about it, then I'll find a link and I'll drop it in.
Cool. I'll stop the recording quickly because that might be out of date. So thanks everybody for joining.